Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video I have my Game Week 21 transfer plans and I'm going to zoom out a little bit and take a little bit of a macro look at FPL at the moment because we've got potential blanks and doubles coming up. Lots of people starting to talk about using their chips, rolling free transfers, taking hits. So I thought if I zoomed out a bit and talk about the upcoming doubles and blanks and the possible permutations, it should help us with our transfer plans not only this week but in the future as well. If you're enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. But without further ado, let's jump to today's video. So I'm not going to talk about Game Week 20 in too much detail because, well, two reasons. Number one, we're barely midway through it. We've still got all of the Manchester United and Man City players and Spurs players. And if you've got Palace players as well, still to play. Also, it's been a bit of a stinker for me. Basically, everything that could have possibly gone wrong has. And despite me basically owning every major rank threat and there being no highly owned players that I don't own, apart from the likes of Salah and Cancelo, who blanked anyway, I'm on a massive red arrow. And it's actually got worse since I've made this graphic. I'm recording this at half-time in the Spurs-Arsenal game, and I'm currently ranked like 4.5k. I don't know how I've dropped from 1.8 to 4.5. I only took a 4-point hit. I did play my triple captain. I know that's been a bit of a failure thus far. There is still a second game, and I still believe that it was a decent decision on paper. As I said, it wasn't the perfect decision. It wasn't the only week you could play it. I still back that, and I think we need to not be led by outcome bias and just say it was a terrible decision if he does blank. I think on paper it looked okay. We were worried about maybe not having that many opportunities in the future. His minutes looked good, etc. I went through all of the reasons, so hopefully he does really well against Tottenham in the second fixture, Haaland. But yeah, it's not been a very good week for me, so let's just forget about it. Let's move forward. You can't look backwards in FPL too much and hopefully get back on the train of green arrows. So this is the way that my team's currently looking. I know I said this is a transfer plan video and I will sort of talk about my transfers a little bit here, but I'm not really too worried about that yet because I want to see what happens in the rest of Game Week 20. And then I also am very, very tempted to roll a transfer despite my team not looking great and despite there potentially being some aggressive moves that I could make. And I'll discuss the reason that I'd potentially look to roll in the next couple of sections. So the team isn't looking great on paper, but I don't think many people will because you've got Arsenal versus Manchester United, you've got Tottenham versus Fulham, and we own some players from there as well. And some of the other players that you might own, potentially like Chelsea players play against Liverpool, Liverpool play against Chelsea. So I think a lot of our teams on paper might not look like they've got the best fixtures. But when you actually break it down a little bit, Liverpool and Chelsea both stink at the moment. And therefore, that could be anything. That could be 0-0. It could be 4-4. So I don't think you necessarily have an issue holding and playing those players because both teams have been pretty poor recently, although Chelsea were a little bit better in Game Week 20. Manchester United, Arsenal, two excellent teams. That could go either way. And even something like Mitrovic against Tottenham. Yes, Mitrovic missed the penalty and it was just an absolute joke. He kicked it against his own foot. So it was like a penalty foul. I've never seen anything quite like it. So he's probably not on penalties, but Tottenham haven't been fantastic. I mean, at half-time, Arsenal are absolutely tearing Tottenham a new one. So could I see Mitrovic scoring against Tottenham? Absolutely. Could I see Spurs scoring against Fulham? Maybe not. But I guess what I'm saying is while sometimes when you glance at it, the fixtures won't look perfect on paper, I don't think that necessarily means you need to go out and panic, play your wild card, take massive hits. Sometimes you just let your team sit there and say, it might not look great on paper, but it might actually get you a lot of points. And it goes the other way as well, because my team looked perfect in Game Week 20. Like I said on stream, I think I've got the perfect team, and it's gone horrifically. So just because your team looks a certain way on paper doesn't mean it will necessarily be a red or a green arrow. With looking at my team, though, moving forward, maybe less so at the specific fixtures in Game Week 21 and more so just moving forward into the future, I'm actually really happy with it. I still think I own the best three premiums at the moment, which is Kane, De Bruyne and Haaland. I think Kane and Haaland are the best two to own. De Bruyne versus Salah is an interesting one because Salah's got greater goal threat, but De Bruyne still has the extra fixture in 23. And I think City are just a better team in general. I really still don't trust Liverpool at the moment. I mean, losing 3-0 to Brighton wasn't great. So I think I own the three best premiums. I am still happy with the three premium structure. And I'm happy with the Mitrovic price point. I'm not necessarily happy with him, but I'm happy with having that price point in my team. Rashford and Martinelli, I'm still happy with. You could argue that Ødegaard and Saka are slightly better options, but I think that's a bit of knee-jerk in response to the first half of Game Week 20. And then the defence is actually all right as well. I'm happy-ish with Castagna, although I don't like the fact that I have to play him a lot of weeks because I've got Reece James still in my team. Trippier and Shaw are great. Ben White's great. Ederson and Kepa's been a funny one trying to rotate them. I seem to get that wrong every week, but I am still happy with the decision on paper. At some point, I might look to sell Ederson and just take some money out of the keepers, which maybe in hindsight, I shouldn't have gone with Ederson. But if I didn't go with Ederson, I would have gone with Cancelo. So generally, the team's fine. Almiron's a bit of a strange one because I brought him in game week 20 to fund De Bruyne and Kane. I said I didn't think he was a fantastic option, but at that price point, I didn't see anyone else I particularly wanted. And I think the fixtures over the next few are still pretty good for Newcastle. They're definitely better defensively than they are going forward, but I'm happy holding him for now. And if we get any doubles announced, there are some really good cheap options at the moment. And Matoma is probably leading most people's list. He looks absolutely brilliant. So does Solly March. A lot of the Brighton midfielders for cheap. McAllister even looks really good. So I think there are still options to move away from Almiron, or if I could get up to Ødegaard, I think that's a great option ahead of game week 23 for Arsenal's double. So this is the way that the team's looking. If I'm thinking about where I might want to make a change for game week 20, it probably is either Mitrovic to Tony, feels like a fairly sort of sensible move. The only issue I've got is if there are any price changes either way, I will be priced out of that. So I've got exactly the money to do Mitrovic to Tony. I don't make early transfers because we could get any sort of announcement before the Game Week 21 deadline. So I'm probably going to be priced out of that, which kind of probably rules it out unless we're just lucky and there aren't any price changes earlier in the week. And then I've got Reece James, who is probably the most obvious priority to sell in my team because he's just sitting there. I don't think he's going to fall in price again, but I've already taken, I think, 2 price drops on him. And like I said, because I've got Reece James and because at the moment some of my other players such as Shaw and White have tricky fixtures, a lot of the time I'm either forced to play Castagna, even though Leicester have been pretty poor, or I have to play defenders with slightly poorer fixtures. So I might have to play Ben White and Shaw this week. It's not a huge issue, especially because Shaw and White are playing for fantastic defences, but it's not great. And if I can get a better defender in for James and take some money out of that spot to leave me money to then upgrade someone like Almiron, that might make sense. But I don't think the team's a huge issue. But what I don't want to do is my team slowly start falling apart and get to a point where around sort of game week 24, 25, I'm looking at my team and saying, maybe that I don't need to wildcard, but I'm maybe 6 or 7 players off the team that I would build if I were to wildcard. Because throughout the season, I've managed to keep my team fairly close to how I would wildcard. Whereas now I think I'm about 3, 4, 5 players away from the ideal wildcard, and I don't want to slowly get further and further away from that. So I want to try and think ahead. I want to try and look macro, and that's what I'm going to try and do in this next section for you, is I'm going to zoom out a little bit, talk about the upcoming blanks and doubles, and talk about where we might want to take our team in the future. So very briefly, before we move on to looking at all of the potential blanks and doubles and the confirmed blanks and doubles that we have coming up across the rest of the season, I thought I'd just very briefly talk about Game Week 25 because a lot of people are talking about it. We discussed it on the deadline stream, but I thought I would just reiterate what's happening. So Game Week 25 is the EFL Cup final week. So the teams that make it to the EFL Cup final will be blanking in Game Week 25. And of course, the teams that they play in the Premier League that week will also blank. That means that 2 fixtures will be blanking and 4 teams will be blanking as well. Now, in the semi-finals, it's Manchester United versus Nottingham Forest and Newcastle versus Southampton. So the 2 favourites to win that, as you would imagine, is Manchester United and Newcastle. If Manchester United and Newcastle both win and they get through to the final, it means that Man United, Brentford, Newcastle and Brighton will all blank in Game Week 25. There is a small chance that Brighton would still have a fixture because they have 2 fixtures to rearrange. So Ben Crane was saying there's a small chance that they might be able to, depending on what happens in the domestic competitions, get another Brighton fixture into Game Week 25. And as a result, Brighton might not blank. But I wouldn't rely on that. Let's say, for the sake of it at the moment, that those 4 teams would be blanking. Of course, if Forest win, then Forest and West Ham would be blanking. And of course, if Southampton beat Newcastle, then Southampton and Leeds would blank. I guess I just want you to bear this in the back of your mind, that if you've already loaded up on Manchester United and Newcastle players, and maybe you've got like an Ivan Toney or a Matoma, and you're already looking at 5 or 6 players from these teams, I certainly wouldn't be looking to bring in a Botman, or I certainly wouldn't be looking to bring in a Ben Mee or a Dunk on top of the players that you already own. I need to think about this as well, because I think by far and away the best Reece James replacement is probably Botman. Really, really cheap. Decent attacking data for a centre-back. And Newcastle are arguably one of the best, if not the best defence in the league at the moment. The issue that I've got is I've already got Shaw and I've already got Trippier. If I bring in Botman as well, I've only got 2 fit centre-backs left, or 2 players that will be playing in Game Week 25, which is Castagna and White, who actually play against each other. If you've already got like a Patterson or a Bueno who's a slight rotation risk, you might be left in a situation where you've only got like 1 fit defender or 1 defender that plays in Game Week 25. So bear it in the back of your mind. The thing to note is that we will have the information around which teams blank in Game Week 25 before the Game Week 22 deadline, because the semi-finals finish on the 1st of February, I believe, and the 3rd of February is the Game Week 22 deadline. So you only need to get through Game Week 21 before we have this information. So it may be worth rolling a transfer. It's one of the main reasons that I think I might be rolling a transfer in Game Week 21, because I've got Almiron, Trippier, Shaw, and Rashford. That's already 4. If Newcastle are going to blank in 25, I'd probably start to look to sell Almiron around Game Week 22, Game Week 23, maybe for an Erdegaard ahead of the Arsenal double in 23. So these are the things I'm thinking about. Let me know down below if that doesn't make any sense, and hopefully I'll clear it up. But let's now take a look at all of the blanks and doubles coming up across the rest of the season. So guys, here are the blanks and doubles that are confirmed plus possible in Game Week 22 for the rest of the season. It is worth noting that this will not be all of the blanks and doubles, but it should be all of the big blanks and doubles and all of the notable ones. There might be smaller blanks and doubles throughout the rest of the season. For example, Game Week 25 could be a double for a team if a Brighton fixture gets put in there, as I discussed. Maybe Game Week 26 too, but these are likely to be very small, where it might be only 1 or 2 teams, and we'll probably get pretty late notice. I think Game Week 35 could be as well, and maybe 38 or 36. So there might be a couple later on in the season, but largely speaking, these are the weeks where we'll have the blanks and doubles, and these are the ones that are going to be big and notable, and we need to try and plan for and potentially save chips for as well. The reason I wanted to draw your attention to these is a lot of people are talking about playing their free hit in Game Week 25. Lots of people thinking, is it time to play my wildcard? I know it's early, but my team is an absolute mess, and I would make 9 or 10 changes. I would do your best to keep your chips, because what we're going to have to deal with later in the season is very, very, very tricky to do without those team-changing chips. And what I mean by that is the free hit and the wildcard. Bench boost and triple captain, if you don't want to save them, that's absolutely fine. But the team-changing chips, I do think it is probably worth hanging on to. So double Game Week 22 is still a possible double for Manchester United, and it's going to be one of Leeds or Brentford. If both Manchester United and Leeds avoid an FA Cup 4th round replay, Leeds have to get into the 4th round first. If they both avoid that replay, then there's I think they said about 70% chance of that fixture going into Game Week 22. If they don't, and Manchester United potentially reach the EFL Cup final, of course that Brentford fixture in Game Week 25 could move to Game Week 22. So they could provisionally announce in the next week or so that the Brentford fixture will move to Game Week 22 if Manchester United reach the EFL Cup final. So it could be like a provisional announcement that maybe Brentford could move to 22. So there's a small chance still, or a reasonable chance I suppose, that Manchester United get a double in 22, and the team that double with them would be one of Leeds or Brentford. The confirmed double in 2023 is still going ahead with Arsenal and Man City, so definitely don't sell your Arsenal and Man City players. Definitely don't sell your Arsenal ones. Maybe you can rotate the City ones if you want to, but that double is coming up too. Then, like I said, we've got the blank game week in 25, which will be whoever reaches the EFL Cup final from Newcastle, United, Saints, and Forest, and the team that they play in that week as well. Then we've got probably what will be the biggest blank game week of the season in Game Week 28. Although this doesn't look too difficult to navigate on paper, depending on what happens in the domestic competitions, it could be the case that we don't need our free hit in 28. And normally you would probably play your free hit in the biggest blank game week of the season. But if we can navigate this blank game week without a free hit, we could save it for the later blank in 32, as we'll discuss, or for another double game week. So just bear in mind that we're going to have a blank in 25, but we've probably got we will have a much bigger blank in 28. We're probably looking at least 4 fixtures, potentially 5 that will blank. So about half the teams in the Premier League won't play in Game Week 28. You've then got immediately the week after what will probably be one of, if not the biggest double game weeks of the season, which is double game week 29. We're probably looking at, again, about 4 to 5, up to 6 or 7 of the fixtures that will be doubles. So potentially looking at between, I reckon, about 10 to 14 teams doubling in game week 29. So definitely earmark that for a potential chip. And if you are looking to wildcard, you could even wildcard into that double game week. We've got blank game week 32, which will be probably the second biggest blank game week of the season. We're looking at about 3 to 4 blank fixtures here. So like I said, if you can navigate through 25 and 28 and you don't need to play your free hit, you could even save it for game week 32 if the fixtures look a little bit more trickier to navigate and maneuver. And then you've got 2 more big double game weeks. Double game week 34, which looks like, looking at the fixtures, could be a really nice week to bench boost. And then double game week 37, which will probably be a little bit smaller than 34, but again, has some pretty nice fixtures that could go into that week. So I don't really want to talk about it in too much detail now, because I think chip strategy will change over the coming weeks, depending on the fixtures, depending on what happens between sort of game week 20 and about game week 26, 27, and the announcements that we get. But what this does tell me is that it will be very valuable if you can to hold on to your free hit and to hold on to your wild card. A rough strategy that I'm probably looking at the moment is to try and get through 22, 23, 25, 28 with 3 transfers in the team that I've got, because I don't think that will be especially difficult, especially if one of Manchester United and Newcastle don't make the EFL Cup final. I'm looking at Game Week 29 though, and I'm thinking that is arguably going to be the biggest double game week of the season. And it might be one that's tricky to, if we're building towards blank 28, and also Game Week 25 blank as well, it might be difficult to also build a really nice team for double Game Week 29. So I'm potentially looking at using my free hit in Game Week 29, which I don't normally do. I usually use it in a blank, but using it in double Game Week 29, then bench boost in, wildcard in 34, bench boost in Game Week 34, another double, and then if you've still got your triple captain, you could potentially play that in like double Game Week 37. So I'm probably looking at the moment anyway, playing all of my chips from Game Week 29 onwards, because that's when all of the big double game weeks are, and that's when you've probably got the highest ceiling. You might say, well, what do we do about Game Week 32 blank? You can almost like dead end into it. So if you free hit 29, you dead end your team into 32, i.e. buy players that are playing in Game Week 32. You then wildcard out of that team in 33, bench boost into 34. In previous seasons, that has been a really nice strategy to dead end into a blank, wildcard, and then bench boost the week after, because you can wildcard the perfect bench boost team for Game Week 34. So that's a rough plan at the moment. I don't want to go into too much detail and confuse everyone. Just to say that, yes, we have doubles coming up, maybe in 22, definitely in 23, and then we'll have 2 blanks in 25 and 28. But don't use all of your chips straight away, because there will be probably definitely bigger doubles, a medium-sized blank as well, and other smaller doubles that you might want to play those chips on. Again, if there's anything that you're confused about, let me know down below in the comments and I'll try to clear it up for you. So guys, there you have it. A shorter video for today, but hopefully it was still useful. Like I said, I just wanted to zoom out a little bit, show you my team, and also just talk a little bit more macro about what's coming up in FPL. And not to panic, but just to give you a bit of an idea about what to expect, and maybe just advise you to, if you can, roll a transfer in 21, and also hold off on using the free hit and wildcard. If you have already used it, don't panic. There are still ways to deal with it, but if you've not yet, I would probably advise holding, at least for the time being. If today's video has been helpful, please drop a like, drop a comment down below, whatever you want to say to feed the algorithm gods. Make sure to subscribe. We are on the road to 60,000 subscribers. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.